This is Chapter 9, Section 6, the quadratic formula and the discriminant. Our learning objective is to solve quadratic equations using the quadratic formula and to find the number of solutions of a quadratic equation. The good news about the quadratic formula is that you can use it to solve any quadratic. It is the tried and true, always works way of finding the solution. And that's our essential understanding. You can find the solution or solutions of any quadratic equation using quadratic formula. All right, so the quadratic formula, if you have a quadratic equation, ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0, and a doesn't equal 0, because if it does, it would be all wonky, then our x value, when we all solve for it, is equal to negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2 times a. Make sure you guys write this piece down as well so that you know where all these numbers are coming from. So let's see how this works with an actual equation. And so I have the equation x squared minus 4x equals 21. And it says to use the quadratic formula to solve this. Need a little bit more room because I am not going to skip steps on you. So I'm going to put over here, I'm going to put some steps. The same process you can follow every time. So step number 1 is to make sure all are on the same side. Poor 21, he's all hanging out here by himself. He needs to be over with the rest of the crew, because if you look at our highlighted pink equation over here, we have 0 on one side and everything else on the other. So we're going to subtract 21. And we are not combining 21 with 4 because 4 has an x attached to it, so it is not a like term, and we cannot combine it together. So we will just have to write that poor guy. All by himself. Oh, that's too much. There we go. All right, so step number 2. Let's identify. Learn how to spell identify. Identify A, B, and C, and put it in the equation. So if I were to rewrite my standard form of my quadratic equation right underneath my regular equation, we are going to identify my a. And here, when I just have x squared, my a is equal to 1. We're going to identify b. The plus or the minus in front makes a difference. So you want to make sure you include that. And then my c value as well. Once we identify it, then we can put it into our formula. So we have an x equals negative b. So that's negative 4 plus minus the square root, it's right up here, of b squared, that's negative 4 squared. Please include the parentheses when you're putting things in. If we don't keep track and do parentheses correctly, it's going to make our answer all crazy. Minus the number 4, it's always 4, times a, which in our case was 1, times c, which is negative 21. All divided by big line, 2 times a. Boy, this is awesome. Only 3 steps. So after we plug it in, we are just going to simplify, simplify, simplify. Let's go simplify to the third. Because we're math, and I could write simplify 3 times 4. And we're at a little tiny 3. All right, so I'm going to simplify this a bunch of times. So I have my x minus a negative is the same as positive 4 plus minus negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. I have 4 times 1 is 4. 4 times negative 21 is negative 84. And then negative 80 minus a negative 84 is plus 84. All divided by 2 times 1, which is 2. So then we're going to simplify again. Four plus minus 16 plus 84 is, ladies and gentlemen, magic number 100. Now, simplify again. So just keep wearing this down. Square root of 100. 10. All right, so now once you get to the end, you shoot it off into its 2 answers. It's going to have 2 answers. One of them is when 4 plus 10 divided by 2, and one is going to be the 4 minus 10 divided by 2. It's where you take into account the 2, the plus, and the minus. This is 14 over 2, which is 7. This is negative 6 over 2, which is negative 3. So the 2 answers we get are x equals 7 and x equals negative 3. Put together. A batter strikes a baseball. The equation, yay, Giants win the World Series. The equation y equals negative 0.005x squared plus 0.7x plus 3.5 models its path, which looks something like this. So here's your batter. He's on the origin, and he hits the ball, and it flies in the air, and then it comes down. See our batter standing right here, and he's like, I'm going to swing this bat. Hockey stick, I can't. So he's our batter's right there. He's so winging that bat, hits the ball, and it flies through the air and has a path that follows this equation. How far from the batter will the baseball land? So if x is the horizontal distance, So just like we did when we solved the equation, we want to find where our equation is equal to 0. And that's going to be at this point here. One of them is not going to be the answer that we're going to get 2 answers, and one of them is not going to be the right answer. So at the end of this, we're going to have to decide which one is the one that we don't want and which one's the one we want. All right, so step number 1, we are going to go negative 0.005x squared plus 0.7x plus 3.5. And that, we want to know when that's going to equal 0. Already done for us, thankfully, step number 1. Step number 2 is identify the A, B, and C. So we put the equation right below it. We line it up. A, B, and C. Next step is to plug it into the quadratic formula. Let me write the quadratic formula here. So that we have it as a reference. So we're going to plug this into the quadratic formula. We have x equals negative b plus minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all divided by 2 times a. Oh, it's negative. Shoot. Sorry, a is negative. All right, and then simplify cubed. So simplify, simplify, simplify. So we've got, and I may need my calculator to help me because my brain is tiny, especially at the end of the week. All right, so I'm going to take all this and show you how to put it in your calculator. So let's pull up a calculator. I have my calculator in scientific view. I recommend that you guys do the same. It makes me feel more scientific. So we're going to go 0.7 squared minus parentheses. Make sure you put everything after this minus sign in parentheses because we're going to just shoot through and multiply all of it. 4 times 0.005 negative times 3.5. Close parentheses. Boop. Equal sign. Boop. 0.56. Yes! Love it when a plan comes together. 2 times a, 2 times 0.005, negative. It would be negative 0.010. And mental math, killing it. Okay. Is 56 a perfect square? It is not, so neither is 0.56. So if I take the square root, boop, we get crazy decimal. So I'm going to just write, I'm going to round 1, 2, 3. I'm going to round to the 3 places behind the decimal point. So we got x equals negative 0.7 plus minus 0.748 divided by negative 0.010. And then we're going to march this into our 2 different x equals. So I have the first one where I have negative 0.7 plus 0.748, all divided by negative 0.010. And I have the negative version of that, negative 0.7 minus 0.748, all divided by negative 0.010. And all it is a calculator check. I love the calculator, so if I can get it down to a calculator check, I'm a happy camper. So I got 0.7 negative minus, plus 0.748 equals, divided by 0.01 negative equals negative 4.8. All right, let's do the other one. We've got 0.7 negative minus 0.748 equals, divided by 0.01 negative equals 144.8. All right, so let's look at our question and see which one we want. How far from the batter will the ball land? Round to the nearest tenth of a foot. So do I want the negative 4.8 or do I want the positive 144.8? We definitely, I would cry if some poor guy hit the ball and it landed behind him. That would be sad for that poor guy. So we definitely want the 144.8. Should we check our answer? Let's check our work just for fun. So negative 0.05 x squared plus 7x, 0.7x plus 3.1. Okay. Let's pull that up. All right. So here is, oh, what's that? 144.8, y'all. Yeah. I wanted us to round to the nearest 10th, so we got to round it. So here's our guy, here's the ball, and it lands at 144. So one of the areas that you guys are going to encounter in your practice assignment is which method is the best one to use. And so I found this, unfortunately, if you guys were off taking notes on your own, this is kind of not very well highlighted. It's not in a box. It's just kind of floating around there in the middle of the page. So I wanted to make sure you guys wrote this down. So the method you want to use and when to use it, because you're going to get specific questions in your homework about it. So when to use graphing, if you have a graphing calculator handy. And in our case, it's when the computer's handy. You can always use graph to check your answers. When do we use square roots? If the equation has no x term. So you look at that scenario on B. It doesn't have just an x, it only has the x squared in numbers. Factoring, you can use factoring. So you use factoring if you can factor the equation easily. If you're a terrible factorer, this may not be very often for you. Yesterday we did completing the square. You use completing the square if x squared coefficient is 1 and you cannot easily factor the equation. Then lastly, but not leastly, the quadratic formula. You can use if the equation cannot be factored easily or at all, and I use it sometimes when I don't feel like thinking about the other three ways. So let's just squat that formula. That guy always works. All right, so when you're looking at your equations, for example, A, x squared minus 8x plus 12, we think what two numbers, when I multiply them together to get 12, will also give me negative 8. So I can factor this one using negative 6 and negative 2. So that gives you negative 8. So this one is factoring. B is what one? Yeah. When it has no x term, we use square root. And then if the equation cannot be factored easily at all, one big hint is if I have a coefficient in front of my x squared. Those ones are really difficult to factor. So I would use quadratic. All right, so we're going to look at just the inside of that square root. So the discriminant is just b squared minus 4ac. And we're going to look at 3 different scenarios for the discriminant. I want you to write down, I don't want you to copy down this full chart, but I do want you to write down the discriminant, each of the scenarios, and then what it says about the number of solutions. That's what you guys are going to have to do on your test. All right, so when a problem asks you how many solutions does a quadratic have, we're not actually finding the solution. We just want to know how many there are. All you have to do is take b squared minus 4ac, and depending upon what that is, you can tell how many solutions there are. So if you are bigger than 0, so if your discriminant is bigger than 0, then you have 2 solutions. It crosses the x-axis twice. If your discriminant is equal to 0, then there is only one real solution. It's just, it taps and touches the x-axis and then turns around and goes back up. If your discriminant is less than 0, and this is how I remember, we're underneath the square root. We don't deal with situations in Algebra 1 where underneath the square root is negative. And in fact, if you tried to do that on your calculator, it's going to give you an error message. So when you go to find the discriminant and it's less than 0, you're going to know there are no solutions. All right, let's do a sample problem. How many real number solutions does 6x squared minus 5x equals 7 have? Let's rearrange this so that all of our numbers are on the same side. So we get 6x squared minus 5x minus 7 equals 0. And then I need to know what A, B, and C are because I'm going to use a discriminant formula. So negative 7 is C, negative 5 is B, and 6 is A. So let's pull my discriminant equation back down here. B squared minus 4AC is equal to, B squared is negative 5 squared minus 4 times A, which is 6, times C, which is negative 7. So this is 25. 4 times 6 is 24, times 7. There we go. So this is minus negative 168. Minus a negative is positive, and I have 25 plus 168. Do my math. I'm not even going calculator on this. Staying strong. So my answer is 193. How many solutions do we have? Is our number greater than 0, equal to 0, or less than 0? It is greater than 0, so there are 2 solutions. Let's look at our reasoning. If A is positive and C is negative, how many real number solutions will the equation ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0 have? Well, if A is positive and B is negative, it doesn't matter what the value of B is because you're just going to square it and make it positive. A is positive and C is negative. You have a negative out here. Positive and a negative will give you a positive. So you're going to get a positive number plus a positive number, and you're going to have 2 solutions. You guys don't have to write that down. That's just extra fun. All right, and that is quadratic formula and the discriminant. Yes.